Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Working on 1113 again today. So I'm going to do a lot of the radiator connections, hookups, bracing, what have you in this video. Lots of miscellaneous stuff, but it's going to be a fair amount of work. So you can see I have a few things already kind of refurbed over here. There's a few other things that are going to need a little bit of work yet, but I'm just going to start by getting some of these connections put on. We have, this is lower radiator pieces here with a chunk of hose to join them. We have the upper connection here, piece of hose for that, gaskets and bolts for things, and period accurate clamps. You can see I've got once used ones that were kind of the best from my stash that I set out. I even have some new old stockers, so thinking I might save these new old stock ones for now, and we're gonna go with the actual authentic ones. So there's the pile. Let's start putting some of these things on. I'll start with the upper lower radiator pipe, if you will. Attaches to the bottom of the water pump. Try not to completely block everything with my hands. Bottom half of the lower hose is next. I've already got the hose on this one because of the angle of this bottom pipe. It's kind of tough to get that one to seal, so I got that in position before I tried putting anything else together here. Top connection now. Put that clamp in place because this is kind of a tight fit. Stretch it on with the hose first. All right, with the connections in place, the next two pieces I need to look at are these small brace rods that go from the top of the radiator surround down to the thermostat top cover. And as you can see, these are quite buggered. They've been broken, and then flat washers looks like have been brazed on, and I think they cut the head off a bolt and extended them after they broke. This is kind of a haphazard setup. It's early first gen stuff. We'll go to the parts manual here once again, and you can see 5J1 to 1275, which would include 1113, had this early setup with those rods. And well, I've got actually a second set. This came off of the beer can engine, and these are even worse. They just kind of gob welded bolts onto these after they broke. They didn't even bother cutting the heads off. So both sets of those little brace rods that I have are broken in the same way, and I think that was rather common because, you know, they vibrate over time and then eventually they fatigue and they break off right here. So see if I can get these out. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some repair on these. First thing I'm gonna do is get those washers off of there, figure out where they welded the extra threads on, and then we'll go from there. All right, wasn't much holding that. See kind of where there's some ugly weld. That's why I go through all of these things. You can't leave any weak links like that. Okay, that's looking a lot better. So we got those repaired, ended up welding some new threaded ends onto there, and I got all my angles and offsets right, and that's exactly how they did it. Just a nut on each side of that radiator, sorry, that thermostat top cover. So, and we've also got them secured with the pins up at the shell end as per parts manual diagram. So that's how they stabilized the tops of these radiators back in the day. Like I said, just about guaranteed to fatigue and fail here again, but it is what it is. We are right, correct, and proper, and it's a much better repair than how these usually end up looking after they've had, you know, who knows who working on them in the past. So we get that part done. On to the next. And that be oil cooler lines and associated hardware. So again, first gen components right here. You can see they use these style lines up until 5J 1275. At 1276 and up, they redesigned the cooler. The lines became much heavier duty, and you can see we have this 5B 128 bracket for those lines. That is this piece right here. Kind of a handy piece to have still had on the engine. A lot of times these have disappeared, and we have this hold down clip right here that attaches to the end of it. You can see where it just kind of supports those cooler lines around the midpoint. After they updated to the heavier lines, they deleted that bracket. I don't think they probably didn't figure that they needed it anymore. So I have some rubber strips that I have cut to replace the old dried up ones. That's just out of some rubber roofing material right there. They will go on all of the attachment points where these clips hold the lines. And if you remember, also I left these fittings loose in the oil cooler when I assembled the radiator core into the shell. We will get these finalized at this time as well. But I didn't have to do a lot to these cooler lines other than clean them up. I did have to solder this end on up here, because when I was taking this apart, I had to put some heat on this fitting to get it to loosen up, and I melted some of the solder out of there. So I just remedied that real quick. So with all that out of the way, we can start putting these on. First step is to get the bracket attached to the side of the engine block. So I'm going to start with the lower line first. That goes in this outer port at the filter housing. And I'm going to start this one first. That can be kind of tricky to get the threads lined in just right. There we are. Pay attention to the position of the line around the bracket, about midpoint. And I've started the fitting on the oil cooler on this end. We're not completely in place yet, but I wanted to get everything really close to know where I needed to line that in, and sure enough I need to turn that just a little bit more. Okay, I like that. And that starts just about perfect. That's why I like to hold off until I have the line almost in place, and it tells me exactly where I need to position that fitting. And upper line next, pretty much the same routine. There's just a little bit more to it because it goes all the way up the side of the radiator here. Get it inboard with the lower one. Start it at the filter base first. Alright, pretty well centered up there. And again, same routine for this upper fitting. We'll twist it around with the final tightening until it lines up. That looks pretty good right there. All right, that was the last piece that I had to tighten down. All the fittings are good there. there. We have the other retention clip in place, the rubber's in place where it needs to be, and lines are nice and solid. They're off of each other. They're not contacting anything, grounding out. So that is the full install on this early style first gen oil cooler setup with the lines. Fittings have been resealed. Everything's in proper position. So we're just about done here. So about the last thing I can do with this radiator is a cap. Here's the one that was on 1113. Honestly, I like it. It blends in. It looks good on there. Problem is though, we look down, you can see inside there, we're missing a lot of, it looks like an old layer of cork was between the tabs and the, well, this contact surface here. And it also looks like there's some old dried up rubber above the contact surface too. And I'd love to recondition this thing, see what I can do with it. I might give it a try. I don't know. This is just a standard non-pressurized cap, and go on Steiner Tractor Parts. They sell these things for everything. They sell them, it comes like this. It's stamped water, and it has the 2 tabs on the inside, new rubber and everything. And that is the same style of cap that was on 2115, my grandpa's old cat. You can see there is not much difference in design between those two. So I have this brand new one. I could use it, but honestly, the shine is quite off-putting. So we'll see if we can rehab this one first and make it a little bit better. I am assuming that the piece with the tabs on it is retained by this dome-shaped, it looks like a rivet head in the center, but there's a curious, almost square-shaped brass feature in the center of that. I can't tell if that was welded, and that's why we have the discoloration in the center more from the heat at one point, or if that's something that was peened over, rounded. I don't know. We're going to try and take this thing apart. I don't know. I might ruin it in the process. If I do, I've always got this for a fallback. So let's just give it a shot. Okay, so I took that center dome down to about 1/4 inch in diameter, 250. And I think I have initiated some movement on the center piece with the tabs. Yep, we got it off of there. Okay, has a square hole in the center. All right. There's the other piece that was behind it. Sure enough, some old dried up rubber. Well, we got it apart anyhow. Okay, after taking a little bit of time to clean it up, have a good look at things, I'm pretty sure I know, well, pretty close how it was put together at one point in time. So first thing, we'll take the piece off that has the 2 tabs for engaging with the radiator filler neck, and beneath that they had a layer of cork. That's what this is, really dried, crunchy cork. So I have to believe that at one point in time, it extended all the way across the face of that brass disc. So this disc comes out. You can see it's dished a little bit. And behind that, this is all that's left, but that is a little bit of a strip of dried up rubber. And it looks like that pretty much filled the whole inside of the cap. And then this looks like a piece of old paper gasket that sealed the center of that disc to the center of the cap. And if you look at how the cap is constructed, if you look really close, there's an inner portion, and then this outer portion is, it looks like the inner portion was set in there and the outer portion was put on top of it. They crimped the rim and they knurled it at the same time. So that's probably really stuck together, and I'd probably have to, well, I'd have to significantly deform the outer portion to try and get this inner portion out. And then the center stud looks like it was a square piece of brass. This is raised around here, so I have to believe there's a flat head inside there that's underneath the top cap. And they just domed or peened the end of it over to hold all this together. So I think I have a plan. Probably, well, to disassemble this the rest of the way, I should try and get the center out and then take that brass stud out of there, make a new one, put it back together, and then, you know, that would be, well, the right, correct, and proper way to do it. But like I said, I'm afraid I'm going to damage this too much if I try and take it apart. I'd like to retain just how it looks right now, so I'm going to try something. Okay, so to break down what I did here, I ended up threading what was left of the brass stud that stuck out of the center of the cap. I went to 1/4 by 28 fine thread on there, and there was just enough sticking out that I could cut some fresh threads. I should have a means of attaching the rest of the components to the bottom side of the cap, and I didn't have to take it apart. From the outside, it's going to look like nothing's been done at all. And I still have the option, if this doesn't work out, to try and peel this inside portion of the cap out and then renew that all together. So we're still not completely behind the 8-ball. We do have other avenues of approach should this not work out, but that's what I did with the cap. Now, the rubber remnant that was left underneath the disc in the center, as you saw, I pulled the new rubber seal out of the new cap, so that solves our problem for that piece. I knew this ugly bugger would come in handy for something. And this old dried up paper center ring gasket that was under the center of that disc, cut a new one out of corresponding thickness gasket material, so we should be fixed up there. The old dried up piece of cork that was underneath the piece that has the tabs that engage with the filler neck, I cut a new one, and again, I'm confident that the cork went all the way out around the outer diameter of that disc, so we should be fixed up pretty well there. Final step was to trim down a 1/4 by 28 nut so that it can go on that stud and fit well. All I need to do now is assemble it. Okay, to assemble, I'll put that gasket in the center, then we'll drop the rubber ring in, and then the disc. We'll try and keep everything centered up here, like that. Now, place the cork on top of the disc, and finally the piece that has the tabs. There we are. Now, to secure it with the nut, I'm going to use a little bit of Loctite. This is one of the few areas that I'll use Loctite on because, quite frankly, it's just not necessary to be put everywhere. But in this application, I want to have a little bit just to help this out because we don't have a lot of threads to engage with. And I'll put way too much on. All right, we'll clean a little bit of that out of there. That's better. So I'll start the nut. Probably can't see much because of my hands. There we go. Everything's nice and tight. Nothing moves around. We have a good compressible seal there. I can actually push it in and compress it a bit with my thumbs. Let's try it on the radiator. Okay, confident that I'm going to have good contact between that cork ring and the top of the filler neck of the radiator, so let's see how it fits. You know what? That is not bad. Everything's still tight. I like how that fits. Pow! Look at that. You can't even tell anything was done to it. Still matches everything just perfectly, so I think that finishes up all the miscellaneous connections that we had to do with the radiator. We got all the cooler lines routed, installed, fittings are all tight, hose connections are in place, brace rods are repaired and in place, and we have a good radiator cap. So that's gonna finish up all the miscellaneous connections for that radiator. I know this was kind of a lot of, well, kind of boring detail work, but it's all stuff that needs to be done. And for the most part, that finishes up the diesel engine assembly. We're going to be waiting on starting engine parts. To do anything else here, I'm going to have to make some phone calls, see if I can light some fresh fires under the machine shop. But a couple details that have to be addressed yet with the diesel engine. Fuel pressure gauge. I'm trying to find one that I can actually rebuild. I'm going to hold off on that for now anyway, because I want to tie a mechanical gauge in there when we do the first test fire to get an absolute PSI reading on that. Same for the oil pressure gauge for the lubrication system on the engine. I'm going to have a mechanical gauge on there too. Right now I'm on the hunt for a temperature gauge that I can adapt into here, but I can also possibly put the old Sylphin gauge face on. So, you know, that stuff's probably not going to be addressed right away. I'm going to wait till I get closer to start up to do much of that. So anyway, I've talked long enough. Thanks for watching, everybody. I might start on the transmission for 1113, transmission / back end next. So stay tuned for that.